I think there's a bunch of Fall Out Boy stuff in here. There's some Lamb of God stuff in here, maybe Metallica. It's a really weird box of things. All right, let me look at this thing quick. All right. Yeah, badass, weird. You know what I mean. Okay, so the story with this box is that I moved to Portland and I had this box full of passes from my entire career. And it went MIA for like 3 years, and I randomly got an Instagram message from someone that said, I found something that might belong to you. It's got lots of pictures and lots of backstage passes in it, and a lot of them had your name on it. So she sent me pictures of it, and this box was my grandpa's, and I used it for sticky passes when I would go see friends and stuff. So all of those are just hangs, but what's inside is work. So let's see. I guess I'll just pull from it and we'll start. This is the first one, Stone Sour. This was 2012. I worked for a band called In This Moment on this tour. That's so long ago. I don't even remember much about that tour. I remember the singer had a dog on the bus, and that's about it. A lot of people really liked Stone Sour. I don't know how you would say they're underrated. Okay, Stone Sour, don't really remember much. This is also from In This Moment. Hailstorm is another one that was that year, 2012, early 2013. But In This Moment toured with them. And like I said, I don't really remember too much from that era of my life because, well, it was a job I didn't care for very much. So we kind of went away. Like a bad childhood, I guess. Here we go. This would have been 2014. A Panic one from Europe. This was the second time I went to Europe with Panic. You could kind of see at the time that things were changing. The first tour I did with Panic was in Europe, and it was in really small venues. And then that was getting bigger, like theaters and bigger clubs. And I think this was, oh God. Yeah. Here's another Panic one. This was probably from the same year. But this was a college tour that we did. We were doing these every year around the springtime when the first few years I started with them. It was just kind of things to get out and do. Let's dig into something else. For the metalheads, this was, I think, the second, maybe third time I was in Europe. It was a tour called Hell on Earth. I mixed Heaven Shall Burn and God Forbid on this tour. This was the first time I think I ever went to actual mainland Europe. I don't know if you can read all of those tour dates, but this was a special time in my life. This was me learning about Europe and seeing venues and countries and things I'd never seen. I loved it. Here's another metal one. Texas Murder Fest. I was working for a band called Misery Index. This would have been 2004 maybe. not too long after I started touring, maybe 2005. Just a death metal fest in a gymnasium in Texas. Here's another old Panic one. Older, I say that, but this is actually, this is the last Panic one. I take that back. This is the last tour pass I got from Panic. You can see my ugly mug on the back. We look very similar. Beard's a little longer these days. Sup, stranger? Here's another one, weird one from the metal days. Band called Watch Them Die. I remember that on this tour, I actually left to go work for another band because, well, this band, Watch Them Die, was touring in a rider van with bunks built in the back, and it had no air conditioning, and it fucking killed me. And they weren't paying very well, so I went. When we got to Chicago, which is actually where I am now, they dropped me off at the House of Blues, and I went to work for a band called American Head Charge. There's another fun back in the day metal one. I worked for God Forbid at the time. This was like the end of us being gone for 6 months solid, I would say. The first time in my life that I ever done that. Here's a bunch of dates on the back, if you can see them. Oh, I guess I've mixed Eyes of Fire too. That would have been the second time around that I mixed this band, Eyes of Fire. They were good dudes. I don't know what happened to them though. Here's a radio festival from 2008 that I would have been working for the Sick Puppies. I couldn't tell you anything other than that lineup for that time is kind of stacked. 3 Days Grace, see their Safety Suit, Shinedown, 12 Stone. Does anybody in here like metal? The K-Rockathon one is funny. Like a lot of those, I did a lot of those when I worked for those radio rock bands that were just these super stacked metal shows. Or not metal, but radio rock shows back in the single-digit 2000s. Ugh. Glad I don't do them anymore. Here's another God Forbid one. This was the beginning of that year where the El Nino one I had said, but we were on tour with Anthrax. This was the 25th anniversary tour of Among the Living. This was so much fun. I love Anthrax. I loved working for God Forbid at the time. That was so long ago now, though. Here's one I wish would have actually continued. This was the Pierce the Veil Sleeping with Sirens World Tour. I came in about a week or two in because Pierce the Veil didn't like their monitor guy that they were sharing with Sleeping with Sirens, and they hired me. So this was the first leg of it with Beartooth and This Wildlife. And then after the holiday season, there was a second leg where I mixed Sleeping with Sirens, Paris, and Pierce the Veil. On that tour, it was Paris and Mallory Knox were the openers. I remember that pretty well. Here is a real vulgar one from one of my very first tours. This is Cannibal Corpse. This was in 2004. I mixed Cataclysm, Macabre, and Goat Whore on this tour. I think I was maybe paid fucking $25 a day from each band, not making peanuts, but having a blast. Here's another one like the K-Rockathon one. I was working for the Sick Puppies, so this would have been 2008. Seether, Seven Dust, Hurt, Red, Tantric, In This Moment. If I remember correctly, this was in Idaho. This would have been in Idaho, I'm sure. Let's see. Digging through. Here's one. Here's a new one. actually, probably the last pass I got. Ege, Jay. This is the pass from Joyland. This would have been the last show that I worked last year. Now, I looked around the house to see if I had any more J passes, and then I remembered that we didn't do passes on the actual tour I did with him. We only have festival passes, so that's basically it for him. Let's see. Sugar, I do monitors for these bands, so the in-ears that you hear or that you see them wearing, the headphones that they wear on stage, I mix the sound for those. So they can hear what exactly goes on. If you've been paying attention or getting them on TikTok, I'm getting all kinds of like Taylor Swift and Beyonce in-ear monitor mix TikToks, and it's just basically the live show with a click track over top of it, and that's not at all what happens in the in-ears. Here is the last pass from the last US Death of a Bachelor tour. This was a US tour. Shortly after this one, I took 3 months off and traveled from, I took the train from London to Hong Kong. It wasn't much long after that. It was pretty fucking cool though. Like, I really enjoyed it. This tour also was the first tour that we took out, the first and only tour that Spencer and I took out analog consoles, which is much different than the digital consoles we usually use these days. Pray for the Wicked, Japan. This one's pretty rad. We loved this tour. I always love going to Japan. It was unusual we did 2 shows in Tokyo in 2 different venues, but being in Tokyo, being in Japan in general, I don't think I'd ever complain. Here's a goofy one. If any of you in here are Indonesian or J fans, this is actually Hammer Sonic from Jakarta last year. I worked for a band called Trivium. I did monitors for them as well. Only for a couple weeks though. But this was one of the places we went. On that tour we went to Bangkok and Singapore and Indo and Australia and Japan. Been a lot of places on tour. Here's another one from that same tour. The Australia Knotfest passes. This festival was a blast. Taking it back to 2007, my Ozfest meal ticket. Someone once asked me, what do you need a meal ticket for? And it's like, yes, Renee, I'm definitely going to need a bigger box. But this box was my grandfather's, and I will not be getting rid of it. It's one of the only things I have left from him. This meal ticket, you would scan and get your fucking lunch and your dinner. This is from 2003. This was from one of the first tours I ever did. We did something called Redemption Festival in Orlando, and I think the headliner was Mastodon, if any of you know who Mastodon is. I worked for a band called Devil Inside. Please note, it says Spud Nation. Choo choo. This is one of my favorite things. Hi, Jasmine. Let's dig. May 27, 2000, Indianapolis 500. I was working for Papa Roach. I think this show was with Stained. The inner part of the track at the Indianapolis 500, if you're familiar with what that is, that was a long, long time ago. What little morale they have. Here is this this was 2008. This is Sick Puppies. I worked for this band for this summer, basically. And funny story about this band is I worked for them in 2008, and then I went to work for Lamb of God. And on a break from Lamb of God, I went back to mix a few shows with this band, and we were at Rockin' the Range, and the manager came to front of house, and he pushed me away from the console and said, "You don't know the new songs," and mixed the whole show himself. So the next morning, I just left. That was one of like 2 tours I've ever quit. Jasmine, I don't know if I have a favorite one. I think that I have favorite times. Like, I'm trying to find one that I saw the other day. The last time I looked through this thing. But where is it? It's not here. I'll find it later. I'd say probably some of my favorite times on tour were with Lamb of God. They really opened my eyes to the whole travel thing. The first time that I was really experienced anywhere outside of Western Europe was with Lamb of God. We went to Turkey and Russia and India and China and Japan and Singapore and Taipei, Thailand and Australia. We did a lot, South America. I did a lot of cool touring with Lamb of God. They really opened my eyes to the world, which is great because I love to travel. Here's a pile of festival stuff from Lamb of God. Sonosphere Festival, which doesn't happen anymore. Another Sonosphere Festival one, which doesn't happen anymore. Another Sonosphere Festival one that doesn't happen anymore. These were all 2009 or 10. Here's a Sonosphere one with Metallica and The Prodigy. So many memories from this summer. So many good bands. I believe this summer we spent like 7 or 8 days in Copenhagen because Metallica played 5 shows in the same venue and Lamb of God opened every show. It was incredible. In 2019, Renee, I got into mixing for bands when I worked at a club in St. Paul, Minnesota, and one of the local bands went on tour and they asked me to come on and I would sell their merch and mix their band, and then a friend's band went on tour and I did the same, and then some bands would come through the venue and ask me to go on tour with them, and it kind of snowballed from there. Jasmine, do you mean of all the places I've been on tour or of all the places that I've been in general? Because I've been to a lot of places on tour and I've been to a lot more places by myself. On tour, I would say Japan is probably one of my favorites. I really like Australia. I really miss Europe. I miss touring Europe in the capacity that like rock and metal bands tour Europe. But Japan is my favorite. Probably will always and forever be my favorite. All right, back to this. In 2019, I got a call to do a fill-in job for the Distillers. It was supposed to be a week, maybe 2 weeks of tour. And it ended up being 2 shows total. The singer ended up getting very sick, and we had to cancel a bunch of shows. So I really only had to work 2 days, and I got paid for a week and a half of being out on the road. It was great. In 2012, I worked for a band called Buck Cherry, if any of you know who they are. And we did this Swiss Sonosphere Festival which is Metallica's festival, but this day, Papa Roach and In Flames played on the same stage as Buck Cherry, and Slipknot headlined the main stage, and I got to see a bunch of my friends amongst a tour I'd never thought I'd be doing. It was kind of wild. I really enjoyed it. Here's another one from the In This Moment days, a Hell Yeah, All That Remains tour pass. In This Moment opened for these guys a bunch, so they just gave us passes. In 2000, oh god, I don't even remember what year this was. 2000 something, it was a single digit. I mixed this band Chiodos for a little while, mixed front of house for them, and then ended up getting fired. This may be one of like 2 jobs I've ever been fired from. The only reason I was fired is because a friend of theirs that they wanted to mix them originally had become available, and they sent me home. In 2012, I did this after the Burial tour with this tiny little band right here called Reflections. They were a local band from Minnesota, and I mean, it was just a favor to a buddy. This is the last time I was in a van. Here are the dates on the back. The pass was cool. My best friend was mixing after the Burial, so I just went and had a nice time. If anybody's been to St. Louis, anybody's from St. Louis, this is Point Fest. I was working for Papa Roach. Winning. Let's see. This is a Trivium Pass from 2005. This is the first time I was ever in Europe. Ever. I worked for God Forbid, and then I mixed a band called Blood Simple on this tour as well. This seems like a completely different life, but it was fucking fun. It was the first time I ever had fucking chips and cheese from a fucking chip shop. It was the first time I'd ever been to London. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, more than I could even begin to imagine. All right, let's see what's next. Okay, here's a Panic one. Jasmine, I was a fan of Lamb of God before I worked for them. I mean, I listened to the music from the record cycle that I worked of theirs, and the music before that. I was a fan. I'm still a fan of a band called Meshuggah, who I worked for in 2008. But not really too many. I try not to work for artists that I enjoy. I don't want it to be a situation where maybe they turn out to be dicks and it ruins the music for me. I did work for Rob Thomas in 2019, and that actually made me a fan of his music. He was such a sweet guy that I couldn't not become a fan of Matchbox 20 and Rob Thomas. It was just weird. So in 2014, when I was with Panic at the Disco, we did Soundwave in Australia. And on the off days of Soundwave, we always did Sidewave shows, and this is the pass from the Sidewave shows. This was Jimmy Eat World, Panic at the Disco, and Alkaline Trio. I think it was like 3, maybe 4 shows that they did together, but thinking back on this is one of the craziest lineups I could think of, because these bands are insane together. Doesn't even make sense in this day and age, but these were some of my favorite shows that I think I've ever done in Australia. Let's see here. Another one. First, let's do these two. This is kind of a twofer. Rock'em Ring, Rock'em Park. Panic at the Disco. These, if you know about Rock am Ring Rock am Park, they're in Germany. They're a summer festival. They are a blast. These are from 2015, I believe. I hardly remember these shows because this was such a quick trip to Europe. We went to Russia. We went, oh God. We did these German shows, and I think we did 1 or 2 shows in the UK, and then we were home. It was a flash in the pan because immediately after that, we started this tour. Weezer, Panic at the Disco, Andrew McMahon. This was a fun fucking tour. This was the first... What summer tour won? Renee, what summer tour won? This one? The Weezer one? It's not burnt. That is crap from my keys. So I'll normally hang my pass from my keys, and that's just dirt and rust and crap. This summer was a blast, though. This was such a fun summer. I learned a lot this summer. I made friends with the Weezer camp. I remember that there was a day off in New Hampshire, I think, and one of the guitar techs almost died because he fell out of his boat, and then the boat almost ran him over. It's kind of crazy thinking, but it is what it is, right? I don't know what this is from, but judging by the date, I was either working for Buck Cherry or Papa Roach. Probably just some summer festival somewhere. Panic at the Disco Mall of Asia in Manila. This was the last time I was in the Philippines with Panic. Please note my real name that no one calls me by, but it kind of is what it is, right? This was a long day. Very long day. Let's see. What other kind of nonsense is in here? Here's another God Forbid one. In 2012, I mixed God Forbid and Shadows Fall on this tour because, well, I needed a job and I wasn't finding, or 2013, sorry. No, it was 2012. Those dates all blur together for me, but this was a fun tour. I wasn't really making a lot of money, but I was having a good time, hanging out with friends, eating food. It was good. Actually, it was really good. Let's see. In 2017, before I finished working for Pierce the Veil, we did this one last festival, this Detroit Self-Help Festival. This was the last day of tour, and then I'm pretty sure I flew immediately and worked for a band called DNCE, if you remember them, the band with Joe Jonas. I don't think I have many Lamb of God things left. I mean, they must have gone missing, or I sold them or threw them away, some shit. But I have this. This is a luggage tag from the Lamb of God era of my life. The era of my life that changed so many things, and somehow I have so little from it. In 2008, I believe, when I worked, so this is the pass from when I worked for Ministry. This was, or not, I didn't work for Ministry, I worked for Meshuggah on this Ministry tour. It was supposed to be the last Ministry tour ever, but somehow Ministry came back and continued to tour. But this tour was like 3 months long in the States. A lot of the times there was 2-3 shows in one venue. It was crazy chaos. People were wild. Burton from Fear Factory was playing with Ministry. Tony from Static X was playing with Ministry. There was a lot of things going on that tour that were just so rad. Okay, Rob Thomas tour that I mentioned earlier. This was 2019. I was kind of back and forth doing a bunch of fly dates and working for a whole bunch of different artists. But I got a phone call that was like, hey, can you come take some weight off my shoulders? This is the pay, this is whatever. I need you in a week. I said, absolutely. And I started July 4th of 2019, and it went through the end of the year. And this is probably a top 5 gig that I've ever had. I enjoyed that job so damn much. I don't even know how to begin to explain how great it was. What's up, Borga? This right here, Borga, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. Actually, not just this, but if any of you bozos that don't know Borga, Borga's great. Borga I met on the Rob Thomas tour. Reading, Leeds. It's funny that you did pop in just as I showed that. It's great. I'm just going through this big ass box of passes, guy. JMMC. I got into this line of work working in clubs when I was young. I stagehand at a club in Minneapolis called The Quest, and I did sound and stagehand at a place in St. Paul, Minnesota called Station 4. And then bands would come through and they'd like the way that I mix, and they'd ask me to come on tour. And it just kind of snowballed. I got asked to go on tour with a band called Goat Whore, which is the most classy name I know, but a bunch of sweet dudes playing metal. I met a bunch of people along the way, and here I am 20 some years later on TikTok reliving my life. Let's do Reading and Leeds. Reading. Reading. Leeds. Panic headlined, co-headlined. Both days, the main stage with Kendrick Lamar this year. It was awesome. But while we were loading out at Reading, Kendrick Lamar's security guy tried to get us to stop, and there was a very huge headbutt between our production manager and their head of security. It was kind of funny. We never stopped, needless to say. Killswitch Engage. This was probably one of the few tours I've actually quit. I was working for a band called Bury Your Dead at the time, and it just was not the right fit for me. I was a tour manager, which later in life I realized I don't like responsibility. So I stepped away from that job and just went home. Sounds like a bitch, but you live and you learn. Let's see. How many of these things can I have? This was from the US Viva tour. You can see that we used these ones for rehearsals in Europe while we were there. And then you can see that I'm a squirrely Spud. It's funny that this photo looks like it was taken from my license, which makes it even more fucking hilarious. Man, I wish that those tours would have gone on longer. I loved that job more than I loved most things. I worked there for 9.5 years. It was a lot of fun. Here's another Panic one. Pray for the Wicked. A little Pulp Fiction action with the art, if you're into that. can't remember which version of the Pray for the Wicked tour this was for, but it was for that version of Spud, and that's funny. I look like a goddamn serial killer. But that was part of it. That was years ago. Here's another one from when I worked for a death metal band called Misery Index. Played a festival called Hellfest in New Jersey. I did my... This is actually from my first tour. This is a festival we played called Sun and Steel Festival in Florida. Somewhere near Tampa. The band I was working for was called Anal Blast. Some bad death metal band from Minnesota. It was one of the weirdest 2 weeks of my life, but I got to go on tour. I got to see so many cool things. I got to see some friends. It was very great. Treasured Viva Las Vengeance tour memories. Viva was a hard one because we didn't know at the end that it was going to end, but there was definitely a handful of nights on the bus where we were all just kind of wilding out, having a blast. And there was a night where one of the crew guys took a bath in the goddamn sink, and that's probably one of my favorite memories of the Viva tour. What's up? Hold on, let's see what this... Some of the festivals do have some of the coolest art. This is a stupid one, but a chili cook-off with Papa Roach. I honestly think that this festival right here, Panic at the Disco played. And I have this weird memory. It was like Panic at the Disco, Weezer, Papa Roach, and some other artists. But, I mean, it's the Lincoln Memorial with the fucking chili over its head. That shit's funny to me. So this is from Meshuggah, obviously, but I was not working for Meshuggah at this time. I was working for a band called Nemec from Sweden. But somehow I ended up living on the Meshuggah bus that tour. The band guys were so sweet. And, I mean, I think that's partially what led to me working for them a few years later. Another Panic one, but it's a one-off. I feel like maybe this was from Rock in Rio, maybe? I don't really remember why we had these ones. There's just a date on the back. So if anybody wants to look up what date this is and tell me, that'd be great. Another, just a Panic VIP pass. I think this was one that I kept with me to just chauffeur my friends around. But it wasn't really good for much else. Let me get some coffee. Yeah, that one's good. The B one, it's really nice. I really do like this one a lot. Let's see. Oh, here's... Someone asked earlier one of my favorite ones. And one of my favorite ones is this one. This Metallica Death Magnetic one. The funny thing is so they put Brian Griffin from Family Guy on here in a Lamb of God shirt because Brian Griffin is Lamb of God's tour manager. That's his actual name. Yeah, the coffin is great shape. This is fucking hilarious. I look like such a child, but I guess I was 27, 28 years old at the time. God. I feel so wild thinking about that. Here's a weird K-Rock festival one. I worked for this band, Smile Empty Soul, for a while, but that dude looks like how I feel most mornings. In 2011, when I worked for Buck Cherry, we did this thing called the Rock Allegiance Tour. This tour was Papa Roach, Buck Cherry, Puddle of Mud and POD, Crossfade, and one or two other bands. This tour was fucking stupid. There was a day in West Virginia where most of the stagehands didn't come back for the show, and the ones that did come back were drunk. And at the end of the night, all of the band guys were basically loading gear with all of the crew guys, and it was a headache, to say the least. Quiet Drive. This is a pop punky band from Minnesota that I worked for a really, really hot minute in like 2007 or 2008. They had a tiny hit. They had a cover of Time After Time, if you know that song. There's another weird festival one from back in the day. I was working for God Forbid, and this one's Motorhead, Hatebreed, Devil Driver, and Meshuggah. This was the beginning of the Meshuggah tour that I did with God Forbid. And then on the back is the Rock and Shock from Massachusetts that we did a little bit later on that tour. Here's a goofy ass old one. It's a Papa Roach one. Go fuck yourself, James Brown. This shit's funny as hell to me. Yeah, Renee, that lineup is wild. So at the bottom of the pass, then the other bands are God Forbid, OTEP, Crossbreed, Nemec, Cemetery, and Trigger Point. It was a weird festival. It was great. I love seeing Motorhead all the time, forever and always. But yeah, this is one of my favorite passes. Not necessarily one of my favorite tours, but the front is wild. The back is the best photo of me possible. Also a child. I was not even 30 yet. Man, those were the days. To be young. Not young anymore. Amorphous, Samael, Leaves Eyes, and Virgin Black. On this one, I mixed front of house for Samael and Amorphous, and I was also Amorphous's tour manager. This was a time in my life when I was trying to figure out what the fuck I was doing. This is also a time in my life where the most vivid tour story I think ever comes back. Tour had ended. We were in, where were we? Atlanta. And the driver dropped us off at the hotel, and we were all getting ready to leave. And we were sitting at the hotel. Everybody had showered. Kind of people had started to leave for their flights. And the driver called me and was like, "Hey, Spud, this is so-and-so. I just stopped on the other side of Atlanta to fill up and start cleaning up. And I just wanted to call you and let you know that there's going to end up being an extra charge on the bus because I was in such and such bunk and there was fecal matter all over the bunk." That's right. There was a bunch of dookie all over the blanket, smeared all over the wall. And it turns out that the person who was in that bunk got blackout hammered the night before and pooed in their bunk. It's vile, but it still makes me laugh, and I still wish I had that voicemail so bad. Ick is right. But it also teaches you a lesson. Don't drink so much with a bunch of Finns when you're just an American, because you will poop the bed. All right. In this moment one, there seems to be a lot of in this moment stuff for a tour that I hardly remember doing. There's a lot of these things. But again, like I said, I really, really, really hated it. So that's probably why I've blocked it out. You want to get real fucking scene and emo for a second? How about Cartel, Cobra Starship, and Boys Like Girls? This tour, I was working for Wyatt Drive on, and I made so many friends this tour. This was one of my favorite tours that I'd ever done. I learned a lot. I met my friend Pavan, who I'm still friends with today. I just talked to him a couple days ago. But it was also nice because it was one of the first non-metal tours I'd ever done, and I was trying to figure out what was happening outside of Fueled by Emos. Here you go. If you want to be emo about it. Yeah, it'd been the first metal tour, or first non-metal tour I think I'd done, and it was just really nice to be out of that world for a hot minute, even though I kind of really miss it. It's just not as fun. Here's a U-Fest pass from what I'm hoping and thinking is from Arizona. I was working for Papa Roach at the time. This lineup is pretty wild. Fueled by Ramen go way back. Let's see. What's funny about that is that's really the only like emo-y type tour I think I ever did. I mean, I did so many of these, but in my head I would have never called them emo. Maybe, I don't know. Depends on, what do you guys think? Is Panic an emo band? Were they a pop punk band? Does it matter? Anyways, this pass was from Music Midtown 2019. This was a fun day. It was just a one-off. We were all kind of already done with the Death of a Bachelor cycle, but we did Music Midtown, we did Firefly, and we did Rock in Rio that year. They were a blast. Such a blast. Rock in Rio especially. This is a pass from 2004, some metal festival I worked in Minnesota. I couldn't even tell you what bands were on this. I was just doing work at home, and this was the pass that needed to be wore at the club that day. Same with this one. Couldn't tell you. Band camp, huh? Probably working for Sick Puppies or Papa Roach. I don't really know. This band, Doth, I worked for on Ozfest. And this is the only tour I really think I ever saw them on. Never really heard from them again. It was also a tour that I ended up not getting fired from, not quitting. They just switched transportation and they had to send the crew home because there was no room for anybody extra other than the band. If you could go back to one show, tour, or time, what would it be and why? Do you mean one that I've done or one that I've seen in general? Thank you for the dates on the back of the B1 being Firefly. I knew somebody would come through. One that I've worked. I would like to go back to the Download Festival in the UK. I think it was 2005, maybe 2006. It was a year that Metallica played all of the Master of Puppets record live, and I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed the shit out of that. But also, The Prodigy played that day, and I really wish I would have gotten to see more of The Prodigy. But I tried at all of these, especially all these European festivals, to see as many of the bands as I could. that I wouldn't get to see in the States, because I really, really, really enjoy seeing music when it's bands I really like, right? This is from 2005. I worked a Danzig tour. I was working for Cataclysm and Eyes of Fire. Look at that little baby potato. What a nerd. I feel like if I saw that kid now, I'd beat him up. Not really, but it's a joke. This tour was fun. This was the first, like, heritage-y metal thing that I ever did. How does mixing differ from festivals when there's no sound check beforehand? Nowadays, it's not really that big of a deal. And a lot of the times, the bands that I work for, we still get a sound check. It's not a big deal in the sense that, like, we use digital desks now, and especially from my end and monitors, it's very similar to the way it was the night before. The next day, the audience changes, the distance of the audience mics changes, some other things change, but like, it's really not that big of a deal once it's all set and dialed in. It's usually the first couple days of working with a new band or new show or new tour that it becomes a problem. And even then, it's still like, without a sound check, the artist knows it's going to be a song or two before things are like good, right? Does anybody else have any questions? Keep asking questions. I enjoy this, but I'm also going through all of this nonsense because it's fun for me to try and remember. This is another one from the same Rob Thomas tour. The Viva VIP pass. This was something I probably would have given to Jess when she came, or whenever a friend would come and they would hang out in Monitor World with me under the stage. 2019, I worked for Walk the Moon, if anybody remembers that band. They were cool. I mean, I only did a handful of shows with them, but it was a blast. We did a bunch of festivals with them. Summerfest was one of them. I remember we were doing some Pride thing in Pennsylvania, and I was miking the drums, and I smacked the top of my head on the cymbal, and before I even knew that I had cut my head, I had blood in my eyes, and just a whole face full of blood from this one little cut on the top of my head. It was pretty fun. When I worked for Sick Puppies, we did a Three Doors Down summer tour. This tour was strange because the support changed all the time except for us. And it was like Theory of a Dead Man, Finger 11, Hinder, Stained, all these like weird active rock bands that, yeah. Here's another Panic one. I think it's supposed to be Jesus holding someone. Hopefully it's not my mom. This is a weird batch of shows, though. It was like Seth Meyers and some festival in Michigan and Lupo's and all kinds of weird nonsense. But then it ended at like Red Rocks and Cynthia Woods. Oh, I remember this. After this tour, I flew to Thailand and took a vacation. It's funny how the one date at the end reminds me of when it was. So this would have been 2015. See? All it takes is a little memory, and you got a little memory. I mean, funny tour stories that come with Panic. Not really involving the band necessarily, but like, so we used to go to the Florida coast every spring when we were on tour, and we'd rent jet skis and rent a pontoon boat and barbecue on a day off. And one year, our merch guy was like blazing around on the jet skis, and he didn't notice the tide was getting lower, and he had hit a sandbar going very, very, very fast, and it shot him off of the jet ski, and he cracked his rib. But so much so to the point where it became such a joke that his nickname became Sandbar, and he now has a tattoo on his leg of a jet ski in an island that just says Sandbar on it. That was probably one of my favorite moments from back then. It was funny. The roadie in the bus sink taking a bath was also really funny. The whole time he was screaming, "I'm a little baby," blacked out drunk. I quite enjoyed that. Here's another weird panic one from something that I don't recall because it does not have dates on the back. But the little Satan heads are kind of funny. Yes, I did post a picture of him in the sink on my Instagram story. That was one of the more wild nights on the bus that I've ever had. Well, not one of the more, but like maybe with them. There was a time when I was working for Papa Roach. It was like the first or second day of tour. Oh God. Okay. Story time. So it was like, we were up all night. It wasn't that we lost our minds fast. It was just that we were all so comfortable with each other, and we had also been spent a month in rehearsals. So we had already been together for a long time that year. But, you know, somebody gets a little drunk. He hadn't been drinking in a long time, yada, yada, yada. Things happen. One of my favorite tour stories, and I was actually going to make like a TikTok post about this, but I don't necessarily know if it is good enough to, was I was on tour with Papa Roach, and we were up all night long. Dude's drunk, partying, have a nice time, whatever. And at some point in time, somebody goes, "Hey, who's got the bottom back driver's side bunk?" And I said, "Oh, that was mine." And the person in the back goes, "Such and such is pissing in your bunk right now." And I was like, "What?" And by the time I got back there, he was already back in his bunk, asleep. So I slept in a different bunk that night. And I woke up to the sound of him grumbling in the front lounge about how dirty and how messy and how sloppy drunks everybody is, this and that and the other. I was like, "What are you yelling about?" And he looked up at me and goes, "What are you doing up there, Spud?" I said, "Well, one of these irresponsible drunks pissed in my bunk last night." Oh my God, I can't believe it. I looked at him and I went, "It was you. You were the one who pissed in my bunk last night. So, it'd be great if you'd stop grumbling about everyone else and take responsibility for yourself." For the next 3 weeks of that tour, he kissed my backside every day. It was ridiculous. Here's some more of these festival ones. This one is Carolina Rebellion from 2013. And then this one is a random Welcome to Rockville one. Yeah, you think I should share that with the rest of the world? It's always one of my favorite TikToks, or not TikTok, but it's always one of my favorite tour stories to tell, because it's like, you know, people always talk about getting drunk and being rowdy, and like, no one talks about the bad stuff that happens. Dude peed in my bunk. Because Viva Las Vengeance was not recorded to a click, how did putting a click to the songs for the in-ear mix work? I didn't actually make the click. I just put it in the in-ears. That was whoever programmed the tracks. It would have been Jake Sinclair or Dan. But I mean, it was there. I'm sure that they had a time that the songs needed to be, right? So they just kind of made it that way. I don't remember it being any more difficult than just being, here's the click track, who needs more of it? I also didn't know that Viva was not recorded to a click. You learn something new every day. Let's see. Let's do these ones. Weezer from last summer. Fuji Rock. This is the first like festival I'd ever done in Japan. Usually it's just a headliner or like a stacked show with some people. And then after that, nope, I take that back. Earlier last year, I did not fest. And I think I did Summer Sonic. So I lied. That was like the third festival. It was the first festival outside of Tokyo that I ever did. And that was cool. I worked for this band, The Struts. When Jess and I came back from our 6 months away from America and moved to Chicago, just to kind of get through the summer, it was a blast. Okay, this is the first Panic Pass that I ever had. This is from the European tour in 2013. When I got the call to do Panic, it was like I'd leave a week later, not much later. I was really bummed because before tour started and after we did prep in the UK, everybody went to Russia, and I love Russia. Russia is a beautiful place with wonderful people. Don't believe the hype. It's amazing. But this was a tour, right? This tour, we were all on one bus, just a small trailer behind the bus. This place that we played in Hamburg, this place called Logo, couldn't have been bigger than 450 people. These venues were so small. We also on this tour shared rooms, and my roommate at the time was our merch guy, Nick, who sadly was one of the victims at the Bataclan shooting at the Eagles death metal show, which is really sad. Sounds of the Underground, I was the tour manager for Terror. This was another one of those tours that I eventually ended up quitting. Things were not a good mesh. I'm not cut out to be a tour manager, and I realized that, so I left. 2003, this is a Minnesota X-Fest pass. The headliners were Audio Slave, Sum 41, Stone Sour, Ministry, Power Man 5000. I worked for this band called Devil Inside. They were just my buddies. One of the first tours I ever went on was with that band. This was a Minnesota thing. This festival was the festival we went to every Memorial Day weekend when we were kids. It was unreal to actually be there working. And it was so much fun. So much fun. Another Rock on the Range one. In 2009, this was the year that I was there with the Sick Puppies, and their manager pushed me away from the console and said, "You don't know the new songs. I'm going to mix the show." To which my reply was, "Then why did you have me come?" He didn't say anything. He mixed the show, and then I just got up the next day and left. I didn't go with them anywhere. I just burnt that bridge because that was bullshit. Let's see what else we got in here. This one from my first full US tour. I worked for this band called Kanai and this band Cataclysm. I sold merch for Kanai and I mixed this band Cataclysm. I started about a week into tour because they didn't have a sound guy and they found out I knew how to do sound. But that was a tour in a van. That was 8 dudes in a van, sleeping in a van, camping out, having as much fun as possible. From your travels around the world, what's your favorite food? Favorite food? I would say one of my favorite foods is called cow soy. It's kind of like a Thai version of ramen made with coconut milk. It's got pickled greens and onions in it. It's like a noodle dish. It's mainly from the north of Thailand. It's delicious. Absolutely delicious. But also I love regular ass ramen a lot. And I'm a sucker for some pizza. It's such an American thing, but I also really like Nando's, if you've ever had Nando's. Maybe I burnt myself out on Nando's a little bit, but it's a very good one. But I like that. Ask questions, please, if you've got questions. I like answering questions. In the meantime, this is a festival that I did in Aalborg, Denmark, with God Forbid. This was from 2006. I saw that band Volbeat for the first time there, and I was thoroughly impressed. Which is funny because now I can't stand that band to save my life. I'd rather stick sharp things in my ears. Do I have a worst show I've ever played? Oh man. When I first started working for Buck Cherry, we flew to Sweden and it was all new gear. And that show was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And then the next day was flawless. And it was... The Sweden show was a nightmare. It was a festival. This festival called Sweden Rock. They had like a 45-minute set, and I had no time to set up the gear, so it was just kind of like, here you go. It was my first day, right? I was just taking the show file from someone else. It was rough, but it happened. The band was unhappy, but the next day and beyond, everybody was stoked. I don't really get that. Even if things go bad now, I don't really get too stressed out about it. It's like most of the time it's beyond my control, and yeah. Here's another pass from when I worked for Sick Puppies. We did a bunch of shows with Seether. What tour do I wish I was a part of? I feel like that's a loaded question because, like I'd mentioned to someone earlier, I don't necessarily want to work for bands that I like. But if I would be a part of a tour, I guess that kind of is different. I wish that I would have worked some of the Ozfests in the late 90s. I would have loved to have done one of those. There's like a small part of me that kind of wishes I worked for, like I was old enough to have worked for Metallica in the 80s, right? Not that I work for Metallica now, but that's kind of one of those things where I wish that those were kind of the eras of music that I wish I could have worked for. What place I've never been that I'd like to go on tour or just in general, Renee? I really want to go to Pakistan. If we're doing this in general, I really want to go to Pakistan. And you may have heard me mention or seen that I did that trip in 2017 where I took the train from London to Hong Kong. That was only technically half of the trip. I had not budgeted properly, and I was supposed to go Hong Kong to London through Central Asia to get back, and I want to finish that. I want to do that really bad. If it's on tour, the only place that I haven't been on tour that I can think of that I would like to go, I don't even know. I'd like to do another show in India. It's been 14 years since I did that. All right, another pass. So I did that ministry tour with Meshuggah, right? This is that tour. This is those dates. This was probably one of my favorite tours I've ever done in my entire life. Does management book your travel for you, or do you book and get reimbursed? Sometimes yes, on both of those. If you end up having to book your own travel, you're usually told what the budget is, and just to do it yourself, which is very rare, but it does happen sometimes. But usually the tour management or the production management takes care of it via their travel agent. Things like Ubers to and from the hotel or to and from your house to the airport, you just get reimbursed for. That's a sticker. This is another festival thing. Freakers Ball, another Halloween type thing that happened in Colorado. At this point in time, I was working for a band called Five Finger Death Punch. The only thing I really remember about this show was that Anthrax played, and I was very, very excited to see my friends Bruce and Eddie. And that made this whole day better because this whole tour was a joke. Maybe things are better, but I remember not having a good time. Let's see. What are some tour necessities? Things you need on tour. I pack Tums because I'm a turd and I eat everything and I know I probably shouldn't. This is a tour necessity, my coffee cup. Because I drank copious amounts of coffee. I think I've drank a whole pot of coffee today. Also, which is what the Tums are for. I bring my in-ears everywhere because that's my job. My passport and a bag are more or less the most important. Passport. I think when I pack, passport, ears, and my backpack and Tums and wet wipes are basically the things that are most important. There's other things, but I feel like I haven't packed for tour in a year now, which it's been a few months, and it seems to escape me. In 2017, I worked for DNCE. This tour was fun. This was in Japan. Let me see what this next what is the time schedule of a show day for you like? How early are you in the venue? So it depends on the tour, right? So like this summer with Weezer, I was usually in around 9:30 or 10. I would get coffee. We would load in the audio gear. I would set up. We would sound check. I would just break it down at the end of the night and then send it off with my tech. On Panic, it was a little different. I would kind of sleep in till like 10:30, come check on things, screw off until about noon, and then kind of did nothing. I mean, I made it a point to tell my tech on that European Viva Las Vengeance tour that it was our last tour, and I was going to do nothing but mix the show, which is exactly what I did. So when we were done, I would take the mics off the drums and I would leave. But my next tour, it sounds like I don't have a tech, so I'm going to work from the second that the door on the trailer opens to the second that the door on the trailer closes, which is unusual in this day and age for me, but I'm kind of excited. So it's early to late and little sleep. We already went through that one. Oh, the bad show thing is this one. Renee. Buck Cherry. Sweden Rock. Another weird Monster Energy drink sponsored rock festival. I believe I worked for In This Moment. So one of the Quiet Drive tours I did in whatever 2007, 8, whatever it was. I don't even remember, the years all blend together, right? Was they opened for Bowling for Soup. This was fun. These dudes were sweethearts. And it's such a goofy thing, but I had such a wonderful, wonderful time. On that last tour, we did soak up our time together as a crew. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but I definitely posted a lot of goofy stuff on my Instagram story. Let's see, what else we got? There's another Lamb of God baggage tag. I was number 9. Here's a DNCE baggage tag. I was number 10. A lot of the times nowadays when you do these festivals, you don't necessarily get a pass anymore. A lot of them are giving you bracelets. So I tend to try and keep as many of them as I can. This one is from Boston Calling from 2022. Is there any artists you're going to tour with this year? Yes, I am going to work with a band called X Ambassadors in April. This kid that I've been working for named Ej, I'm going to Malaysia with him at the end of the month. And I have a phone call about a job tomorrow that would take me through September. Here's another Sick Puppies. Nope, this would have been Papa Roach. 3 Doors Down, Seether, Papa Roach, Alter Bridge, Finger 11, Sick Puppies, Apocalyptica. Does anybody know about Apocalyptica? This band of cellists. They are incredible. Actually, in 2005, I worked for this band called Eyes of Fire, and they opened an Apocalyptica tour. And this thing is wild. Like, they're 4 dudes that play cellos and a drummer from Sweden. They're all in the Stockholm Symphony or something like that. And they play like rock covers on their cellos. It's so cool. It's so cool. They did a lot of songs with like singers. I think Corey from Slipknot did a song with them. The singer from 3 Days Grace did a song with them. Like, it's very neat. Especially the older stuff before they had like actual famous vocalists do things with them. It was very cool. Here's another festival one. I'm assuming I worked for Sick Puppies at the time. But Filter was on this one, and I love me some Filter, especially that first record. It's so good. I'm an old man who likes terrible music. I don't know if you can even hear my music playing, but it's bad. On that Ozfest that I did, the band I was working for was doing off-day shows with a band called Nile. That's this. This is the weirdest pass because it's almost more like a business card, a plastic business card, than an actual backstage pass. But that band sucks. That was no fun. Again, like I said, I got sent home because the band's vehicle broke down and they ended up sharing a bus with people. This Petapalooza. This was a quiet drive bowling for soup show for pets at the UNLV football stadium. It was a very quiet day. Shut. What are we shutting? When I was on that Cannibal Corpse tour, Macabre did off-day shows, so we needed a pass for that. If you know anything about this band, all of their songs are about serial killers. I believe that's Ed Gein. It's hilarious. It's a good shtick. Lots of goofy songs. Lots of goofy stuff. Here's another Quiet Drive one. A Change of Pace, Quiet Drive, A Classic Crime. This was April 2007. This was like a solid state tour, but somehow Quiet Drive got put on it. Yeah. I don't have too many memories from back then. I'm old and I'm forgetting things. I love that you're making a list. Let's see. So from that first time I was in Europe, here's a really weird glued together Blood Simple Trivium Pass from the UK tour. If I remember correctly, Blood Simple was only on like the last 5 or 6 shows. And I'd mixed them in the US as well on that Static X tour I did, if I ever mentioned that. But it's just stuck together so very generously. Here's another festival pass brought to you by Pabst Blue Ribbon, man. 2003 would have been In This Moment. Again, we did a lot of festivals with that band at that point in time, and I have so few memories from that era of my life because I didn't like that job. In 2014, I did some shows with this band called Airborne, a Toxic Event. This was another one of those weird December things where it's like I took a job for a few weeks and most of the shows got canceled because of snow or weather. I'd never heard this band before. I'd got this job because of my friend Hoogie, and this was fun. These dudes were cool. They have one song that I still like find myself listening to from time to time, which it's called Changing or Changeling. It's a quality tune. You should check it out. No idea what this is from. Launch Music Conference. I don't know what that is. If someone's bored. Hi, Josiah. I love you. Josiah is one of my best friends, and he's a nerd. Yeah, here's a Static X one. This one's fun. This one is from 2004 or 5. Glad somebody said it. Always glad somebody said it. I worked for American Head Charge on this tour. If anybody remembers that band, probably not. But there's a picture of me with a helmet on. This was... Thanks, Josiah. That's great. That's going to be fucking funny. Yeah, anyway. Here's a theory. I worked for Theory of a Dead Man for one summer. This band was kind of fun. We did a bunch of things. Did you know that there is a state in America called DuQuoin? I didn't either, but apparently these guys played the DuQuoin State Fair. It's really not a real place. It's just a town in Indiana or Illinois. But that was fun. That was a fun summer. That was every year there was every day off it was Roadie Friday, and we would wear Hawaiian shirts. That was the first time ever that I did that. And there are tons of pictures of me, I think, on my Facebook where there's just a group of dorks wearing Hawaiian shirts, like nerds. Here's another Panic European pass. This is, yeah. This one's from that time where I mentioned we went to Russia and Rock'em Ring, Rock'em Park, and the Slam Dunk Festival, if anybody remembers that. I don't have a Hawaiian shirt anymore, Josiah. Leave me alone. This Panic one, a little off-road, is from the Australia-Japan tour. Boo, you. You should see the pile of the mess that I've made in this house, Josiah, with these passes. It's really not that bad. Should be worse. Here's another stupid festival one. This would have been probably Papa Roach. Actually, this was Papa Roach. This was the last day, I think. I saw Iron Maiden this day. My brother picked me up, and we drove home from Minnesota. There's a lot of that in a lot of these. Not just the Panic at the Disco ones, but like some of the festival ones have movie references. I remember that one of the Point Fest ones had the Blades of Glory or whatever, that figure skating movie with Will Ferrell. Learn more about the U.S. elections. Yeah, I see that too. In 2005, more God Forbid stuff. God Forbid was the first band that I worked for kind of an extended period of time. I think I worked for them for about a year, maybe a little bit longer, but there's a ton of God Forbid stuff in here. Well, not really. This thing's dwindling down a lot faster than I expected it to be. Let's see. Ozfest? Band Doth. I really need to put all of these things on key rings that are the same. This is like the second Ozfest thing and the third Doth thing I've seen on here. At least I got them all. That's important. Oh, here. This is exactly what I was talking about. Point Fest. Blades of Glory. Hi! Power Prog. Atlanta. Nerd rock at its best, but I was mixing this band Amorphous. This was the first day of tour. This was the 2008. I think my one friend from Atlanta was probably still in diapers at the time. Here's a funny God Forbid Caliban full-blown Chaos one from my hardcore days. This one? Which one they make at Staples, Josiah? The Power Prog one? Absolutely. This one is in a pouch, so this one is not even made at Staples. This one's just a piece of paper slid in a pouch. Jasmine, someone's got to be making a list. That's just radio channels. Power Prog. I worked for this band called Smile Empty Soul, if you remember this band. They had a couple hits back then on the radio. When I worked for them, they were barely playing 500 cap rooms. It was kind of pathetic, but also incredibly fun because there was no responsibility. And I loved all of that. That was great. Here's a Weezer summer pass from this summer. I always think it's funny when bands use the advertisement as their pass, because what's easier to fucking counterfeit than just the pass? Even though it's got a little hologram thing, it's still kind of a joke. This is from Rock in Rio. This thing is huge. Like, it's as big as my face. But, you know, you definitely know you're going someplace if you're doing this, right? Yes, everybody knows my name is Jeremy Juggy. Let's see. What else we got in here? There's another bag tag. What was such a cool show? The Rock 'em Ring one? Here is the first US Panic one that I did on Too Weird. This was a wild little tour. We were doing 1,000, 1,500 cap venues with a semi. It was a lot of learning for a lot of people, but it made us all real close. But I remember being in Minnesota. It was January 21, and it was like -15, -20 maybe, and everybody's bundled up, hats and this and that, and I'm in my fucking windbreaker, hoodie, beanie, and shorts loading the trailer like it was a spring day, and everybody thought I was insane. Probably because I am. But also growing up in Minnesota in that weather, I kind of get used to it. Also, I'm fat, so you get kind of used to it. Here's that summer pass from that year. Walk the Moon, Magic Man, Youngblood, Hawk. I don't even remember any of those bands, but Walk the Moon. But this was amphitheaters. This was fun. This was 2014. Here's a Nemec one from 2005. Just more metal nonsense that I worked for in my early, very young career. It was fun, but you learn, right? That's how you learn. It's a Rock 'em Ring, Rock 'em Park, Lamb of God. There's a Rock 'em Ring in this moment. Another God Forbid one from 2005, 2006. (2014) Soundwave. This was the year that the Jimmy World Alkaline Trio Panic Sidewave shows were happening. These were so much fun. I loved this tour. Just before Panic every day, AFI played. Just after Panic was Pennywise on our stage. It was cool. I remember the day in Melbourne, Australia. I did not sleep until we got to the airport and flew to Brisbane and then went straight to a show, and I was miserable. I was a miserable prick. I slept on road cases, and I think at the time I was fighting with my ex-girlfriend. Quality times. Here is another weird radio festival from 2008. Seether and the Sick Puppies in this moment. I worked for this band that I don't think anybody's really ever heard of, Fair to Midland. This would have been in the same year as the Meshuggah thing. These guys were great. Wild, crazy little rock band. They are fun. I love break stuff. Break stuff? What does break stuff have to do with anything? Unless you're saying I look like Fred Durst, because I've been getting that my entire life. I remember the first time I flew home. Oh, Limp Bizkit is playing. What, Josiah, you know I worked for Meshuggah. Meshuggah. Here's another dumb Panic one. Dumb, creepy pervert Potato Man face. I love you, Connor. Here's something funny that's in this box that is not a backstage pass, but just a concert ticket. Who went to this? Who saw Pink at First Avenue? My old ass, apparently. God, I love my friends. You people are assholes. 2007, I worked for this. So I ended up leaving this tour actually to go work for Chiodos, which was probably a terrible idea considering, like I said earlier, they let me go once their friend was available. But this tour was fun. Catatonia is a rad band, a rad, sad band if you have never heard them. I enjoy them a lot. Never went to a live concert. You should probably do that as soon as possible because that's kind of life-changing. Concerts are great. Making me feel some kind of way with this screenshot, Connor. What year was this? I think this was 2011. I worked for a pile of death metal bands that nobody had ever heard of. Rotting Christ, Malakesh, Hate. I mixed all three of these bands. It was 3 bands on one bus, me and a merch person, tour manager. It was miserable. Miserable. I don't know why I put myself through those things. I hated it. It would be expensive, Jasmine, but it's worth it. Josiah, there's tons of passes. Do you remember who headlined that day? Was it Hailstorm? I found a bunch of In This Moment stuff, but I don't remember if it's Hailstorm. Now you maybe... No, In This Moment did not headline. I think it was Hailstorm. So there's a pile. This pile is so goddamn big. Slowly running out of things here. But yes, I have one of those passes somewhere. I showed it earlier. It kind of was what it was, right? In 2006, I needed to get the hell out of town because I was sick of things. So that band Doth that I worked for was on tour with Cattle Decapitation and Goat Whore, and I worked for those 2 bands for a little while. It was only a couple days, but this tour was fun. That was around when I worked for them, was 2007-ish. Amber. It was the tour that had Pierce the Veil and Devil Wears Prada, I think. Sucks you gotta run. Good luck. Have a lovely time. Hi! Yeah, I mixed that tour for like 3/4 of it, I believe. When I worked for Nemec, I was also mixing a band called All That Remains, which a lot of people have heard of. This was just a one thing, but this is from Montreal. They opened for Arch Enemy. Hi! There's another goofy festival one that I don't remember from 2000 whenever. 2006, I worked for God Forbid, and we were on tour with Children of Bodom, if you remember that band. Probably not. Arch Enemy was the first... What? How was Arch Enemy one of the first metal bands you got into? Thank you. I'm doing pretty goddamn great. It's weird. I don't know why, but I enjoy it. Of course. MySpace was a thing, right? You want to talk about another pass that got made at Kinko's or Staples or whatever, Josiah? This one is tiny. What else is in here? Hey, Josiah, how about this one? Self-Help Festival. On this, I mixed Pierce the Veil and Sleeping with Sirens. Nothing compares to MySpace. I mean, to be fair, like, it was so much better for all of us as humans. Like, it was much more personalized, right? You could be a coder and have the greatest MySpace ever. Josiah, this was a hailstorm pass. This could have very well been from that tour that I met you. Thank you, Renee. From Nintendo Fusion Tour. What was that tour? Was that like Academy Is and I don't even know, Motion City or something? That was way before my time. Here's a Papa Roach Rocklahoma one. I only know because the date. What else is down here? Fall Boy, Motion City Panic, Boys Like Girls. That band I worked for, Quiet Drive, had such a huge problem with Boys Like Girls. It was always funny because they were always up for the same shit and never got it because of Boys Like Girls. Here's a Trivium pass from last year from Australia and Asia. Thailand through Japan. Great times. In 2019, when I was working for the Distillers, opened for the Misfits in California. This was incredible. So cool to see the Misfits. This was something that Zach made that was never really a pass, but he handed out to those of us who like cameras. And I loved this. Let's see. The camera one is sick. It's great. I forget it's in this box, but I'm very happy that it's here. 2006, I worked for God Forbid. They opened for Chimera and Arch Enemy. This was a very long tour. Very few days off. I am responsible for bringing Jake into the Panic family. It's not something I should take credit for because Jake did his own, but I definitely gave Zach Jake's number. Let's see, there's just a couple more passes in here. Yeah, of course. Jake was my buddy, man. I love Jake. In 2012, I mixed a band called Escape the Fate. Do you remember them? They played this Aftershock Festival with STP and Deftones. Just a bunch of garbage. Except for the Deftones, I guess. Oh god, yes, Escape the Fate. Here's another one from Australia. This is Trivium Amon Amarth Not Fest off-day shows from Melbourne and Brisbane. Not Fest Japan from last year. I was working for Trivium. Don't even remember what this is from. Earth Day Birthday 2013. I'm going to assume it was In This Moment. Another Papa Roach one from, I don't know, 2011, 2012. I worked for them twice around then. Once I was like the tech and the stage manager, and then Josiah, when I lived in Orlando, I went to Earth Day Birthday once too. In like 2001, I think. I don't even remember who headlined. I remember a bunch of the new metal bands I like played, so I went. But it was still when it was like in the street, not at Tinker Field. Okay, so I got one left in this pile of nonsense. Oh, here. This is from Download 2006. This is very important to me because this is one of the the first really big festival I ever mixed. But yeah, I got one left, and it's a goofy ass one that's just like the Coffin one, but it's a headstone. This is Metallica. This is from another one from when I worked for Lamb of God. This is so cool. I wish that I could have done these tours forever. These dudes, the crew was so amazing. The shows were so much fun. We got to see so much rad parts of the country or the world. Jeremy. That's my name. All right, so we're out of passes. I went to see... Oh, wow, Josiah, I completely forgot well, you did come to that. Wow, that's... God, I'm old. My brain does not work as good as it once did. Offspring 2001, I could see that. You can really tell which bands festivals put in the effort in the passes and which ones don't. Well, I mean, the pass really isn't that necessary. It's just the thing that, like, allows you in the building, right? Which, I mean, the more money you have, the more extensive your pass is, the better the art can be. This one is something that I missed. This is from that first Kanai tour somewhere. I think it was the Knitting Factory in LA, which who the fuck knows what happened to that place. I haven't been there since that tour, I think. But that's it. That's what's left in this. That's all that's left in this box. There's tons of stories, tons of just a mess. You remember Nicole talking about what? Thanks for watching. I didn't know how this would go, and I fumbled over my words and had a nice time trying to remember things. I'm not surprised it's closing down again soon. Is it still on, was it Hollywood or something? It was by, like, the Roosevelt? When Panic played the Knitting Factory back in the days? Oh, that's stupid. So it's not even the old one. But there was also a Knitting Factory in New York that I had gone to a couple times. I don't know if that's still there or not. Oh, clean this mess up. What kind of road stories you want? Ask a question, I shall tell you something. It's hard for me. It's funny to try and remember when you're put on the spot, right? Like, looking at these things, you would think that they would remind you of fun things, but like, I have like 3 stories that completely stick out in my head, and most of them are things that you've probably heard on here. Yeah, it's interesting to look through them. It definitely like jogs some memories for sure, Renee, but who knows what, like, it's funny that there's none from like my Lamb of God time except for some Metallica ones. I was with Lamb of God for 2 years, a little over 2 years, and there's nothing here from that. Fueled by Emos, ask a question. What's your favorite show you've been to as a consumer? Favorite show I've been to as a punter was either Ozfest 97, which was Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Marilyn Manson in the Antichrist Superstar era, was Pantera, Typo Negative, Machine Head, Fear Factory, Powerman 5000, Downset, Vision and Disorder, or Pantera, Machine Head, Cold Chamber in like 97. An Arkansas show, Renee, like any Arkansas show. I remember there used to be this place in Little Rock that we used to do when I worked for this band called Misery Index. That I cannot for the life of me remember the name of it, but it was downtown and it was tiny. It was like they did mostly death metal shows, and it was always a really, really, really good time going there. The people were amazing. I am going to see the Pantera Lamb of God tour next weekend in Green Bay with my brother. I want to go see Jason Isbell, but those are sold out, and I will actually be in LA doing rehearsals with Ige at the time. So as of now, I don't know what other shows I would go to this year. It depends on who's on tours. It depends on if anything. Like I just went and saw a band called Machine Head down the street. I live like 4 blocks from a venue in Chicago. And that was the first time I'd been there since we moved here 2 years ago. But if friends come through town, I'll happily go see them. It's really weird to go to a show as a patron now for some reason for me, but I enjoy it. Powerman did put on some crazy shows. I enjoyed them a lot in the late 90s. Like, they were a really fun band to go to. Panic, the opportunity to tour with Panic came in like September of 2013. A friend of mine had texted me and was like, hey, I heard it through the grapevine that Panic at the Disco needs a monitor engineer, and will you send me your resume? So I sent him my resume, and like 3 days later, the production manager for Panic called me. We had a chat. He said, do you want the job? And I said, when does it start? And it started like a week later. And a week later, I was on a flight. And the rest was history. So it was kind of a luck of the It was a luck of the draw thing there, but it was still a really great thing for me because, you know, like I was there for 9.5 years off and on while they were actually touring. It turned my beard gray or white. What else you guys got? What else would you like to know? The beard is a work in progress forever. Amber, it's true. Like, it does something weird to you working. Like, it almost feels like going to work when you're not working, right? I still enjoy sometimes. It's more of like I go and I'm shocked by things. Like, a few years ago, I went and saw my friends that were working for Matchbox 20, and I watched Matchbox 20. I hadn't seen them since like 96. And it was 10 seconds into the show, and I was already floored, and I loved every second of it. Renee, favorite tattoo? Maybe this one. I love you, Josiah. Do you ever mix for bands and just never actually get to know the band personally? Kind of. With some bands, like with I did this Weezer thing this last summer, and they were all kind of distant. Like, was very much a professional relationship. I worked for Jelly Roll briefly after that, and he was kind of distant. I was only there for like 2 weeks, but it was kind of similar. But I had known a bunch of the band guys for the Jelly Roll thing from Sleeping with Sirens. So yeah, it does happen. You're always nice, but not like, not 100% like, oh, we're buds, like we're friends. Call me when you get home. On the off days, it honestly depends. Like, some days you don't want to do anything, like, and you don't leave your bed in the hotel. Some days everybody goes to the bars and hang out. Everybody has dinner. Like, it just truly depended on how worn out you were. Because I mean, they are long days and they are different. But at the end with Panic, we weren't staying at the same hotel as the band, so we never saw any of them unless it was like sound check or whatever. But that's just kind of how it went when things got bigger, and Jake hung out with them all the time. Pardon my napkin, I get coffee in my mustache. It's funny to look at these, though. Like, I hardly remember any of these, except for this one. This one. This was Heaven and Hell, and Megadeth and Machine Head, which is, Heaven and Hell is like Black Sabbath, which is classic. What else do y'all got? Anything else? Anybody want to talk about anything? How about this one? Of course, Sugar Soaker. I can't talk today. Maybe I've had too much coffee. How about this? When I worked, I was a huge Incubus fan when I was younger. The first like 3 records, so what? It would have been Enjoy, Incubus, Science, Make Yourself, and Wish You Were Here. So the 4 records. There's even one called Fungus Among Us that I liked that was like a demo. Incubus was great in the 90s and the early 2000s. I kind of just stopped listening to them. I'm pumped for Nicole, though. Like, I love that she's in the band. I absolutely love that. It's a really good fit for her. That girl rips on the bass, so that gives her the room to do that. Yeah. How about this for a quick little story? I was on a tour. I did a TikTok about this years ago, but it is muted currently, so it's not really a fun story. But I was on a tour, and we were in Washington. We were driving to Calgary overnight, and a bunch of people were in the back lounge getting high. And the driver said, when you're done, bring whatever's left of me. I'll throw it out the window before we get to the border. We got to the border, everybody got off the bus, and they took the dog to the bus, and the dog immediately smelt it. The driver forgot to throw it out the window, so they raided and tore apart the bus. They found the smallest little amount in someone's cigarette pack in the bottom of someone's backpack. The person whose backpack it was basically had to go back to the American side, had to walk back to the American side, explain what happened, have them let them back in, sit on the American side for hours. I had to go with him because I was the tour manager, and then by the end of that, we had to come back to the Canadian side. And had to go through immigration all over again. It took 9 hours to deal with. And then we had